So we know Joe Biden has his share of influencers doing his bidding. Some are paid and some are paid and pretend they aren't. But Joe and his super PACs ought to get their money back if this is the best they can do.
In 2024, don't vote for the guy who commits crimes. Just don't vote for the criminal. You have Joe Biden, 0 felony charges, 0 investigations, 0 convictions, 0 indictments. Then you have Donald Trump, convicted of 34 felonies, 4 indictments, an additional 54 felony charges, and many criminal investigations. We all think crime is bad, right? Don't vote for the criminal. It's that easy. It's always crazy to me when I see like straight white guys between the ages of 18 and 29, like myself, supporting Donald Trump because like, do you guys not realize how bad a Trump victory would be for you? Does that not click? There's nothing manly or cool about voting for Donald Trump. What's actually honorable is standing up for people whose voices may not be as loud as yours. Food for thought.
No, well, as corny and cringy as Harry and other Gen Z influencers are, the young vote is no laughing matter. Both candidates and both parties need young people to win. Well, my next guest has been pounding the pavement in his pursuit of truth and his advocacy for conservative values since the age of 11. I've had the opportunity to meet and work with him several times, both online and off, but he is RNC Youth Advisory Council Chairman, Brilyn Hollyhand. It's great to be with you. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely.
So I played that clip of Harry Sisson. I don't even know how to necessarily say his name, but he's on my feed all the time. I engage with him often. I ask him how much he's being paid for each of his posts. I haven't had a straight answer out of him. But, you know, he's not the only one that's doing political advocacy. You've been doing it longer than he has. And you got a book that's coming out July 9th, one generation away, how now is the time to restore American freedom. I couldn't agree with you more. But listen, there seems to be more influencers on the Democrat side. It doesn't seem like conservatives or young conservatives get into that game as much, but you're changing that. Do you think there's actually more young conservatism than we've been led to believe?
Oh, there absolutely is, Tommy. And first of all, thanks for having me here in your beautiful Nashville studio. It's great to be with you again and excited to have the opportunity to talk today. You know, I remember when Harry first came on the scene, and first of all, let's just acknowledge if Harry's the best money can buy, the DNC has a problem because he's pretty cringy and he doesn't get his facts straight most of the time. But we know the DNC doesn't have their facts straight, so he's just getting their talking points straight from HQ and DC. So, you know, when he first came onto the scene, a lot of people were like, oh, you know, we don't like this whole bought and paid for thing. We don't like him being a paid influencer. He absolutely should put in his bio that he's a paid operative of the DNC. But the idea itself isn't so bad. It's something that Republicans have not done. We don't interact with influencers online at all. It's up to, you know, people like you and I who don't get paid at all by the RNC to kind of stand up and do this ourselves. So this is an area absolutely where Republicans need to step up on because, as you know, there are young conservatives out there in the droves, in the masses. And as you see in polling, President Trump is winning the youth vote. This is the first time this has happened in history.
Yeah.
This is historic because, as we see, my generation is fed up with Joe Biden and his policies, and we don't want to live under another 4 years of that.
It also just rings so disingenuous to me.
Yes.
Listen, if you've got people that are willing to advocate for you and they're getting paid to do it, that doesn't necessarily bother me if they're getting paid for their efforts. But if you're getting paid to push a narrative that you don't actually believe, I have yet to meet a Trump supporter, at least in the last 5 years, who's not actually a Trump supporter. They put the policies out there. They advocate for the man himself. They like Donald Trump. Whatever it is, it comes from a genuine place. But even deeper than that, it's the conservative values. And that's something that has been important to you. You've been going around interviewing politicians, talking to people since you were 11 years old. That's just been a passion project for you. But I'm wondering, when we're looking at the divide with young people now, a lot of people in older generations are a little nervous. I'm a millennial. I'm a little nervous about Gen Z. I see Gen Zers out there like yourself. They give me a lot of hope. I see some frat boys at UNC holding up the American flag that give me hope. But then I see what I call little terrorists on college campuses that are actually advocating for terrorist organizations, advocating for Hamas, Queers for Palestine. You're out there with Gen Z. Do you feel like Gen Z has lost their way, or is that just what the media is portraying? What do you think the actual numbers are, or the percentages are, when it comes to where young people, particularly Gen Z, actually fall?
Sure. No, it's 100% just what the media is portraying. I mean, what we're seeing as we travel to college campuses, and we just wrapped up a campus speaking tour, is time and time again, we'll finish a speech and have, you know, several young people walk up and afterwards and say, hey, I disagreed with a lot of the things you said, or I voted for Joe Biden in the past election, or my parents voted for Joe Biden if I wasn't old enough to do it. And I can't do that again. I cannot fathom the thought of living under a Biden economy again. I mean, think about this, Tommy. You remember graduating from high school. You remember going off to college, voting for the first time, renting your first apartments, kind of going into that era of life. My generation's going into that era of life right here, right now. I'm a senior in high school under a Biden economy. That's what we're starting off in. I mean, yes, Biden's economy is hard for my parents and grandparents because they've also been set up for so long. We're starting our life in this era, and it's so difficult and so challenging. And so I think people waking up, and it's obviously not just the economy. There's a lot of other issues with Biden, but that's the main number as we poll young people. And I think they're seeing that. I think we're really, really, really seeing the tides turn. And that's why we wrote the book. You say, there's so much, lack of hope in America. I've spent the past 7 years traveling this great country, and time again, I've heard people, young, old, say there's no hope in America. There absolutely is hope in America, but it's up to us to start that change, to start that tide, to start the revival, of restoring American freedom. So that's why we wrote the book, and that's why we're traveling the country.
When you talk to young people, whether researching for the book or just in any of your endeavors, and they hear about the student loan forgiveness or the free things, does that excite them? Because I'm not going to lie to you. If I'm an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 25-year-old, and I got student loans or I'm looking to go into college and I see how much it's going to cost me, and I don't know that much about the world, and I see that old man up there who's freezing but is willing to wipe away my debt, that might influence me. Is it working?
Sure. Well, as we've acknowledged, the DNC has had this stronghold on the left for so long because they buy our votes. They bribe us. They buy our votes time and time again every time we have an election cycle. And, of course, they're doing it again. They see they're failing poll numbers of the youth, so they're going to throw, some thousands of dollars at each of us to try to pay off our student loans. But I think people see through that. I think they see that as disingenuous. The most recent conversation I had with President Trump was he was in Montgomery, Alabama for a fundraiser. We were backstage talking. He's waving his hands in the air, and he said, Brilyn, what can we do to win the youth vote? And I said, sir, you've got to go out there. You have to be authentic, first of all. And second of all, you have to harness social media. He's obviously the king of social media. He knows how to harness social media to get his message out. And so he's done that. He actually listened to my advice. He's gotten back on Instagram, a mainstream platform.
Yeah.
And he's gotten on TikTok, a Gen Z platform. And his numbers are through the roof. Why? Because he's being authentic and he's putting his message out straight on social media. He doesn't have to buy these ads that are going to go on cable TV that my generation doesn't watch anyways. All he has to do is film a 30-second video, post it on TikTok. It gets right in front of the eyes of my peers, and they're going to vote for him because of it.
How big do you think that the Jake and Logan Paul of it all, how big do you think that is? Because for me, I mean, those are names that millennials know, Gen Zers know. And when you see the Paul brothers with Donald Trump doing those videos, that's big. Absolutely.
It's huge. I remember vividly a conversation I had last year sitting at a conference table in Washington, D.C. as my first meeting as chairman of the RNC Youth Advisory Council. And I turned to the chairwoman at the time and said, ma'am, the days of the RNC being able to buy an opinion column in a Sunday paper to get our message out are over. That's it. We're done with that. We have to come modern. We have to modernize as a party. And that's difficult to tell the grand old party to modernize. It's kind of, a difficult thing to do, but we've done it over the past year. So picture the influence of the separate YouTube channels of both of those brothers, and now having their support. Obviously, the Nelk brothers, other groups have put their support behind President Trump. That's huge. That's major, and that's getting it directly out there for free. So, I mean, I think that's an incredible move that President Trump's making. Obviously, he's the social media king, and he's made the attention to that. We're not paying anybody. Biden's having to bribe people, and they're putting cringy content when we have authentic, free content going out on channels. I think it's a major move, and I think we're going to see it reflect in polling as this month finishes out.
Well, Donald Trump is doing well with men. He's doing well with young men. So there's a big divide there.
There is.
I'm not so worried about the male vote because I think that he probably has that. Young men are coming back to the Republican Party. I'm seeing that. You're a young man. I'm sure you're seeing that as well. Young ladies, older women, that's where I think that the Republican Party is struggling. Sure. I know for me, as I sit here as an elder millennial at 31 years old, I look at women that are my age, and the abortion issue is big for them. Roe v. Wade is big for them. They see Donald Trump as the man that got rid of abortion. Now, regardless of how you feel about abortion, young people, it didn't used to be something that was, I guess, an issue for them, maybe. A lot of young people didn't really understand it. Yeah. At least when I was in high school and college, it wasn't as big of a thing as it is now. When you're talking to people and you're trying to convince them that they are, in fact, conservative, is that an issue that gets brought up that they really understand?
Yeah, no, of course it is. I mean, originally, every time we gave a speech, the first question would be BLM. That was,
Yeah.
the fiery talking point at the time. That's what everybody did. Then it turned into this, kind of LGBTQ trans movement. Now it's abortion. That's kind of the thing of the time for the left. That's what they're going to get us on every single time. But I don't think it's a losing issue for us. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. I think we as a party need to sit down and explain our position. For so long, we've been anti this, anti that, anti that, and we pick up and move on and walk off the debate stage. We never sit down and have a conversation of why we're pro this, why we're pro that. And so I think that's something that President Trump's done a good job of. I think it's something that having Laura Trump now as the RNC co-chairwoman is huge. Now she can go into these college campuses, speak at sororities and say, hey, I'm a woman, I'm a mother of three. This is what we can do right now as women to empower ourselves, as Republicans. I mean, we're the pro-woman party, we're the pro-family party. We need to be proud of that. We don't need to cower in some corner and shy away from that like Republicans of the past. So absolutely, like you said, we're doing well with men and teenage boys, but I think that's absolutely an area where we can improve on now that we have Laura in as co-chairwoman.
Which is great, which is why I want to talk about kind of the new RNC.
Sure.
You've seen it evolve. I mean, at such a young age, you've seen it evolve. I'm happy to see that the RNC is reaching out to people like Scott Pressler, who I know that you work with as well, because to me, we can have the great candidate, we can have the superior policies, we can even have the great message on social media and elsewhere. But if we don't get people registered to vote and make sure that they're actually voting, we're going to lose every time. I know that you mentioned that you've talked to Scott Pressler about that. I know he's out there pounding the pavement, getting as many voters as he can at truck stops. I mean, anywhere he goes, he's registering voters. But what part of that extends to the youth vote?
Sure.
And what do you think we can do better?
No, absolutely. I mean, I talked to Scott as recently as yesterday. I remember giving him a call. You mentioned at the top of the segment the frat boys that held up the American flag during the terrorist sympathizer protests that were going on campuses. I called him and said, look, we have to get on these campuses. This is a perfect opportunity to start voter registration and say, look over here at your quad. Look at what these crazy students are doing. Don't you want to register to vote to make sure that they're not allowed to do that? That can't happen again. And so I think that's a unique opportunity to come in. We already have some plans in the work. We'll give you a tad bit of an exclusive here to do some more campus tours as we go into the fall with the RNC.
That's great.
Obviously, we want to do some more, with fraternities. So we've started, contacts with them and making sure that happens. But yes, Scott's the king of grassroots. And again, in the past, previous RNC leadership, they're the ones that should be reaching out to grassroots, and there was none of that. So with the new leadership, obviously merging with the Trump campaign, every day, all day, as grassroots reach out, and I could not be more excited to work with them.
Tailgating is a big thing
It is.
as we head into that time. I mean, obviously the election's in November, so there's not a ton of time.
Sure.
But right when it kicks off, I mean, I feel like Republicans need to be out registering everybody at tailgates, especially in SEC territory.
You're
I mean,
right.
that's very winnable people you think are already in your column, but not necessarily because they might not be registered to vote at their current address, which is something that Scott puts out there often. I know it's something that you advocate for as well as somebody who's trying to get the vote out. But I'm also wondering, you write about this stuff in the book, how we're one generation away. I want to know when you're talking to young people, because they used to ask me this when I started out at 21, and my older colleagues would say, Tomi, what do young people, what do they care about? What gets them excited? You mentioned the economy.
Sure.
What else gets young people excited about politics? Just interested, whether they're for Joe or they're for Trump, what gets young people interested in the conversation to begin with?
Yeah. So first on the tailgates, not to reveal too much, but I will say, obviously born and raised in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, college football is my life. I've, gone to every game growing up. I will say that, the show College Game Day is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we love the setup of College Game Day, and it would be really cool to have the opportunity to travel to campuses with some surrogates. That's definitely something that's in the works and we're talking about. So there will 100% be some type of tailgate operations. Because again, that's a fun, lighthearted, come out and get the vote event. You could have voter registration at those events, have some type of speaker on behalf of the president's campaign and then, different swing state districts for Senate or House while we're in that area. So absolutely, that is in the works.
That's
and
great.
I'm smiling because I don't want to reveal too much too.
That's great.
But that's definitely something that we're planning. And as for you talk about what's getting Gen Z interested, there was a Fox poll that came out yesterday that said the number one issue for young people is a threat to democracy. And Harry immediately put a video out and said, look, this is Democrats that think right here that Republicans are a threat to democracy. Actually, I've heard the opposite, Tomi. I've heard time and time again, traveling on college campuses, these are young conservatives who are voting for Trump say, that's the party that claims they're pro-democracy, but they try to take Trump off the ballot. That's the party that's pro-democracy, but they're trying to throw their political opponent in jail because he's beating them in the polls. So yes, we want to protect democracy. As the book says, we want to restore American freedom. That's the number one issue for us. It's just not what the Democrats side think. We're actually going to vote Republican and also still want to restore democracy. So I think that's getting people excited. Because again, We don't want to grow up in America where it's the standard to be able to throw your political opponent in jail. We don't want to grow up in America where it's standard to be able to, kick your candidate off the ballot because you disagree with their policies. I absolutely think that that's something that's going to energize my party, energize my generation, because we're waking up and realizing that.
Another thing that I think should be important, and granted, Gen Z, they're just getting out in the world. A lot of Gen Z, their parents are still picking up the tab for a lot of things. And that's not something to be ashamed of. That's kind of just the way life goes sometimes. If you're lucky enough that your parents are kind of footing the bill for a while, that's great. But I think that young people really need to understand once they do start getting into their early 20s, their mid 20s, even late 20s, wanting to buy a home, wanting to afford rent, wanting to actually be able to go out and buy things, like go on vacations like all the influencers are doing. I think that's another blind spot that the Republican Party needs to get in on, because people see this influencer lifestyle. Well, listen, if you can't afford grapes and eggs at the grocery store, you can't afford to take these influencer trips either. So reminding people, I think a great thing that Scott put out there, I know the RNC is kind of pushing now, is Trump won't tax your tips. A lot of young people work in the service industry. So those are the kind of messages that I know that you're putting out there, and I know the RNC has revamped itself. It's putting out there. So I'm hopeful. And kind of in closing here, what is something that older people, when they read your book, because a lot of older people, they're interested in the young people and they're interested in what makes them tick, right? What is something that somebody who's a little older would read in your book that would surprise them?
So what I think so unique about this book that's different from others is that it can go for 3 different groups. It can be a book for young people who are interested in getting involved in politics, maybe not even having a job in politics, but at least kind of want to know what to look out for, what to be aware of as they grow up in a world that this election, the stakes are so high, it's going to decide the future we grow up and raise a family in. So I think it's so important for our generation. I also think it's important for parents and grandparents out there, parents specifically who look out and see this indoctrination that's going on as early as pre-K and want to stop that, want to put an end to that, want to start instilling Christian values, conservative values, and morals in their own homes. It's a book for parents, but also grandparents who look out at this world right now, Tomi, and they don't recognize it. This is not the America that they grow up in. This is the America they want their children and grandchildren to grow up in. So that's why we wrote the book. That's why it's performing so well, and why we're getting such a receptive audience for people that, again, disagree with us on some issues. We're like, hey, you're right. When you say Make America Great Again, there was a better America that we'd like to come back to, and I think the book is going to be specifically for them. So it's available for pre-order right now, all major retailers. Signed copies are on my website, brilynbook.com, and it'll come out July 9th, and we're just excited to get to talk about it with you.
Coming out right before the Trump sentencing, right before the RNC convention, so a great time for a book like yours. I mean, congratulations to you for working so hard at such a young age. I mean, you've built this yourself. You've been out there, you've been asking for the interviews, and I give you a lot of credit because you're really relentless, and that's what it takes, not only to win votes, but also just as somebody who's a young professional. You have grown up so much in this world, and I know you care about it. And that's what rings true and genuine. Harry couldn't even buy that, not even with all the DNC dollars. And I hope that you engage with him as I do on a daily basis on Twitter and on all social media, because it really bothers him, and I love to see that. But congratulations on your book, out July 9th, available for pre-order, 1 generation away, which couldn't be more true. Congratulations to you. Thank you for being in Nashville. Congratulations on the rest of your book tour. Stay safe out there, especially in the blue cities like New York. And thanks so much for being with us and for doing what you're doing and continuing to do what you do. You've done it yourself. So good for you.
That means a lot. Appreciate you and your incredible team getting this together, and we're just excited to start it with you.
Yes. Well, congratulations again on the book and your efforts with the RNC, because we need people like you. Absolutely. Lord knows we do. All right, folks, that does it for this Friday episode of Tomi Lahren is Fearless. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless, and I will see you right back here live at 1 p.m. Eastern on Monday from Nashville. God bless and take care. What's up, guys? Thank you for watching Tomi Lahren is Fearless. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you'll never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.